Hi, I'm Jason Houtsma, guitar instructor for worshipartistry.com. In this video, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the Earthquaker Devices Organizer. Now, the organizer at its heart is essentially an octave generator. It takes whatever notes you play, and you can add an octave above as well as an octave below. You can mix that in. You can also use the choir effect to take those octaves and regenerate them so you can get an extra 2 octaves. It's a really unique and interesting pedal. There's some kind of Leslie effects on it. And essentially what we're going to do in this video is first I'm going to talk you through just kind of what each of the knobs does, how the pedal works. And then I'm going to give you some examples of ways that you can use this particular pedal in a worship environment. So let's take a look at the pedal first. For the moment, let's ignore the dispatch master. I'm going to be using that to get some of the tones later, so I figured I might as well have it in there so you can see what my settings are. But let's look at that organizer. You notice we have in the top left corner, you have the up, which is simply just mixing in your higher octave, so whatever the octave is above the note that you're playing. You have the down in the middle, which mixes in the volume of the lower octave. The choir, which as I mentioned earlier, regenerates. We'll take a look at that in a second, but it regenerates your octaves. Your lag on that lower left-hand quarter basically puts a delay on the effect. So your signal's going in analog, you have your dry signal, and then you have the effect that's on top of it, and you can delay that so it comes in a little bit later. It also has an effect on the way that the Leslie tone kind of affect, or the Leslie effect affects the tone. In the middle, you have the tone knob, really standard. You know, the lower you turn it, the more high end it takes off. And then finally, on the lower right, you've got your direct signal. One thing that's really nice about the direct signal on this pedal is that your direct signal always stays all analog. The effects, so the octaves are generated digitally, but it never changes what's happening with the direct effect of your guitar. So for example, right now I have all my octaves turned off. So essentially, so you hear that direct signal is really just taking over. You know, like I said, you're going to hear a little bit from the pedal, just the other effects that are on there, but the direct signal stays analog. All right, now let's see what it does. I'm going to actually turn down the direct setting so we can really hear what the effect is first. So you'll notice with no direct signal, you're not getting any sound. Now we're going to go ahead and add the higher octave. Notice there's kind of that automatic Leslie effect on there. Now let's listen to the lower octave. We'll crank that up as well. Lower that higher octave. Now let's put those two together. Now let's take a look at that choir effect. In order to use the choir effect, you actually have to have both the lower and higher octave on. But you'll notice it adds a whole nother octave on each one. Now personally, I like to actually keep my direct signal pretty hot, unless I'm intentionally trying to create a true organ type tone. So I'm going to mix in the direct tone now, and we're going to hear how that sounds. We're going to put them all straight up so they're all even. We'll lower that choir a little bit as well. Now you'll notice that with the lag turned completely off, the organizer tracks all the notes I'm playing really well. I can run around the scale, I can play chords, it'll work great. It tracks really nicely. However, sometimes when you're playing, you want to get a little bit more of that effect in there, and so by turning up the lag, it actually delays the digital signal. So let's hear how that sounds. So you kind of hear that stand out. We can crank it way up, and it almost acts like a delay. So that's what each of the knobs do. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of play through some different ideas, ways that we can utilize the effects of the organizer. You'll probably notice that I've actually been using it quite a bit in the videos, even when there's not even when it's not in the recording. Because a lot of times when you're playing with like a worship song that has 10 guitars in it, and we're trying to recreate that, sometimes having a pedal like this that can generate octaves just adds a little bit more meat to what we're playing and can fill in some of the frequencies if the other instruments aren't taking those up. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to play some arpeggios, and I'm actually going to lower the octave. And you'll notice that we used that in a recent All Sons and Daughters tune, and I'm going to actually put that down below. I believe that was For My Glory and My Good. I'll double check that, but I'm pretty sure that was there. So I'll put that as a related lesson so you can really hear it. But here's just some basic, real soft arpeggios using a lower octave. Now let's add that higher octave and some reverb. Really fills out a lot of that tone, right? It just kind of fills in some more of those frequencies. Now let's go, I'm going to go throw on some overdrive. This pedal actually really takes overdrive well. I'm going to add some of my speaker cranker overdrive, also Earthquake devices. I like those guys. And I'm going to utilize that to create some lead lines. We did this recently in Desperation Band's song Banner. Also in their song Wonderful, we can actually bring in that riff. So I'm actually going to play the riff from Wonderful that a synth does, and I'm actually going to add some overdrive in these octaves to give it a little bit more of that almost synth-like tone. Take that off. Yuck. Right? It sounds so much plainer without that extra body to it. So that organizer really just fattens it up. Another thing that you can do, if you have some songs that have some more keyboard Rhodes type tones, not just organ, obviously it sounds like organ, but playing single light notes can actually really once again add more body, add more mid-range to those notes that necessarily wouldn't stand out quite on their own. So for example, Matt Redman's Mercy, which we just did, I used the organizer on that chorus line when there was no guitar to just mimic what the keyboard was doing. So it sounded something like this. If I played it without the organizer, it'd sound like this. Now we add that organizer. Once again, just adds that little something extra. It's also great for getting some nice thick pad tones by bringing up that lower octave and combining it with a volume pedal. So now I'm going to bring in some delay from the Dispatch Master, my volume pedal, still have a little speaker cranker on as well, and we'll see what kind of pads we can get with this thing. Now granted I was using other effects on that, but let's just take the organizer off and play the exact same thing. Now ultimately, this pedal was designed to sound like a church organ, so it seemed only appropriate to close out with a hymn. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask in the comment section down below. And if you'd like to purchase the organizer, I also have a link down below as well. I link to Zounds because honestly, I have just always had such a great experience with them, and they'll match any price. Thanks for checking out worshipartistry.com.